When we lose someone that we're close to, that's considered to be a retrospective loss. There's an understanding to retrospective loss. A pregnancy loss is considered to be a prospective loss. So it's a loss that is most deeply felt by the person carrying the pregnancy and potentially his or her partner.
And I remember just thinking I personally have always been pro-choice, but I was ignorantly living in a bubble of, Roe v. Wade, abortion is legal, never really paid attention to how drastically women's reproductive rights have been stripped away over the years. So I just remember it felt like being smacked in the face, that here I was in the middle of a crisis and we had absolutely no support from our medical providers. I just couldn't believe that in the year 2015 that I received this devastating diagnosis, and I would receive all kinds of support if I chose to continue the pregnancy, but if I chose to end the pregnancy, I lost all support.
I just remember sitting there and kind of zoning out and not really listening to what the doctors were talking about for a bit, because I had just heard in my head that my daughter was going to die. There was nothing I could do at that point. I just remember looking up at the MRI on the screen and her whole head was being overtaken by this tumor. I can't tell you how many people, when I came out with my story, who I've known, who I went to high school with, who I worked with, would just send me messages and be like, hey, I went through something similar. Thanks for telling your story, because it makes me feel less alone. And so beyond humanizing, I think telling stories creates this sense of community among the people who have gone through whatever trauma it is that they've gone through. Whenever someone reaches out and has questions or anything, and I don't know if excited is the right word, but it is kind of like an excitement that I get, that I'm like, oh, this is still an issue that's on people's minds. We're not being shelved right now, because there's a lot of times in legislation and the way that our politics and everything are going, that I feel like we get shelved. There's no greater effect to legislation than understanding what real people go through. And until we listen to real stories, we won't know what changes need to be made.